In 2007, the people of Myanmar were protesting against increased fuel costs, but it was really a protest about lack of democracy in a military-ruled country. And that protest, what was called the Saffron Revolution, was led by Buddhist monks and nuns and joined in by thousands upon thousands of ordinary people. They used non-violent means. They were trained and they were practiced and they were rooted in compassion and non-violence in how they did things. So they organized meetings, they marched, they rallied. They did this thing with an upside-down bowl as a symbol of protest, which I just think is quite creative. And in that cultural context, really powerful. I'll come back to that in a moment. At the time of the 2007 revolt, I was living in Birmingham. I was a trainee vicar in Birmingham. And a bunch of us really wanted to do something in solidarity. So we took action in solidarity with them. I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. And we'll think about how effective or not it is to do acts of local solidarity to global issues or issues in other countries. The Buddhist monks used this really interesting symbol of nonviolence. They used an upturned begging bowl. The begging bowl or alms bowl is a really ancient symbol in Buddhism of the relationship between the monk and nun and the lay person, the ordinary everyday person or householder. So every day, traditionally, the bhikkhu, the monk or nun, will go out, the ordained person will go out and beg for food, enough food for the day. And while they're out begging, of course, amongst people who have jobs and go around their ordinary lives, they are also talking to them and having conversations about the Dharma, about the way of Buddhism and the philosophy of the Buddha. And so the conversation is two-way. It's a relationship symbolized in the open bowl, but it's one of spiritual and material sustenance, really. And so when the monks in Myanmar marched down the streets with their alms bowl held up high and turned over, they were saying to the government, this relationship between us and you is over. Really, really significant. If you think of Buddhism as the national religion and the majority, the vast majority of people in Myanmar are Buddhists, they are saying that there is a total disconnect between the relationship of the institutions of the national religion and their own government. And so it was a thing for the government to be afraid of. It was the beginning of the end for that government. And years later, not many years later, there was democracy. So it worked. It was effective as part of a slightly longer, but not much longer, campaign for justice. And it did inspire us. I was in Birmingham, as I say, in the time, and we wanted to do something to show our solidarity. And I heard about some friends up in Bradford who'd blockaded a total petrol station of a fossil fuel company that was invested in Myanmar. So it was part of an anti-Western investment in a military dictatorship. And what they'd done was they'd blockaded the petrol station with Buddhist prayer flags. And we thought, this is really interesting. Let's do something with Buddhist prayer flags as well. So we got lots of flags with no writing on them. So traditionally, Buddhist prayer flags have prayers written on them, and they are in 5 colors. They're in blue, gold, green, white, and red. Yes, 5. Good. Got that right. And so we took plain material in those 5 colours in lots of squares, spent hours and hours cutting up these squares, and we went out into Birmingham and we invited people of all faiths and good faith to come and write messages of solidarity with the people of Myanmar. And so people did. We had Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, Christians, people of good faith, all faiths, and none coming up and writing their messages of solidarity and using their religious symbols on the flags too. And we had those then strewn up on the street furniture, on the fences and the lampposts around where we were doing the action. And we then had a candlelit vigil in the evening in Victoria Square, if you know Birmingham, with all the prayer flags there. And the West Midlands TV and radio came along and interviewed us and talked about it. And we were able to raise the profile as the headline news item that evening on the West Midlands News. But and then something surprising happened in terms of what happened next with the flags. I will come back to that later because I do want to talk about these 5 principles which come from Thich Nhat Hanh. Now, Thich Nhat Hanh was a Vietnamese monk who wanted to popularize Buddhism across the world and created what is called now Engaged Buddhism. So that term of Engaged Buddhism came from Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh then started the Plum Village movement. So if you have any Plum Village Buddhist movements or organizations near where you live, then you're looking at the Vietnamese begun Engaged Buddhist type movement. They're great. And they popularized mindfulness as well across the West. So the chances are that if you've heard of mindfulness or you practice mindfulness and you're not a Buddhist, it may be because of Thich Nhat Hanh. And he really pushed that as really important. So what did Thich Nhat Hanh say about how we bring about the world as it should be from the world as it is using nonviolent resistance? I'm going to use the acronym of ALIVE. Do I mean acronym? Acrostic? I'm going to use the both of those acrostic of ALIVE to describe what he taught. So first of all, A is for analysis. Thich Nhat Hanh teaches that it is really important that we get really deep to the root cause of injustice, that we don't just react to the injustice in front of us, but we look at the whys. We look at why people do the things they do, why those who seem to be opposing justice do so. What are their fears? What are their concerns? What's driving people to do what we consider evil? To ask the deep questions, to do proper structural analysis of where power lies and where it's moving. Power analysis is so important. There's no point having any strategy without power analysis. Your strategy is never better than your power analysis. So analysis of the situation, right analysis, is the first step in terms of being an engaged Buddhist, bringing about nonviolent change. The next step is listening, deep listening. Thich Nhat Hanh taught that it was so important to listen to the other, to listen to those who are oppressed and on the margins, but also to listen to those who we consider to be our opponents. And of course, it connects to our analysis. We need to analyze and we need to listen deeply to properly understand. Not listen in order to speak, but listen in order to understand. And to listen not just to words, but to listen to what's behind people's words. What attachments, what grasping, what fears are behind the words that people say when they say things that seem to be unjust. So A is for analysis, L is for listening, deep listening. I, which is at the heart of the word alive, of course, is interbeing. Interbeing is a phrase that Thich Nhat Hanh came up with, but it resonates with all traditions of Buddhism. Interbeing is the recognition that while we appear to be separate selves, you and I and everyone around us, those who seem like opponents and those who seem like friends, actually we are all part of the same beingness, that we're all part of the same process, that the separation is a useful social construct, but it is an illusion. So to see properly is to know, not just to understand, but to know that all beings are interconnected and really we are one as much as we are separate. We are an interbeing. And to recognize that is how we have authentic compassion for the other, because we stop thinking about them as completely other to ourselves. So interbeing is at the heart of the word alive, and it's at the heart of nonviolent resistance to evil in engaged Buddhism. And next, of course, is V, and V stands for views, right views. And this isn't perhaps how you might think I'm going to talk about it. Right views in this case isn't about knowing exactly the right view, but holding lightly to your view. In Buddhism, the importance of not grasping after anything or grasping hold of anything too hard is really important, and that includes our point of view. So for Thich Nhat Hanh, if we're going to do compassionate resistance to evil, we mustn't hold too much to our isms and ideologies. When we hold too fast to our ideologies, we stop deep listening. We stop doing honest analysis of the situation because we want the situation to fit our own ideology. And so to be resistant is to hold lightly to our isms and our ideologies, to have a view that doesn't say our view has to be right, but to be prepared to be wrong and to change our mind. And finally, of course, has to be, in any engaged process, is engagement, to engage with the world outside of ourselves. Thich Nhat Hanh said that we should treat the destruction of people's homes around us and the destruction of people's lives the same as we might the temple that we sit and meditate or pray in. And so we treat other people's harm as harm to ourselves. There is a Buddhist saying that the foot feels the foot when the foot feels the floor. The foot feels the foot when the foot feels the floor. And this means literally when we meditate, have your feet crossed or flat on the floor, but it really means that unless we are out walking amongst everyone else and amongst ordinary people, we will not really find any sort of enlightenment, that we won't understand our own suffering unless we live with the suffering of other people. And so for Thich Nhat Hanh and for engaged Buddhists generally, it's so important that we do justice, that we get out there, that we have practical karma, because otherwise we're just people sitting on our own in a cave, and that is no way to really understand anything of ourselves. We have to be with other people. There is a sixth one which I think underpins or goes over the top of all of these, however you want to put it. But before I come to that, I'd say what happened to the flags that we had in Birmingham. Do you remember I said earlier we strew these protest flags, if you like, these solidarity flags across the street furniture? We took them back to our college, and it happened that there was a visitor, a Christian visitor from Myanmar, who was at the college at the time, and he was speaking in one of our chapel services. And so he took the flags with him back to Myanmar, and he gave them to some Buddhist monks over there to let them know that we were with them and supported them, and we were holding them in the light as they were shining a light for all of us. So it was a way to properly, personally connect what we were doing in the UK, in the United Kingdom, with what was happening in Myanmar. And I did say I'd talk about the dark side of that, the shadow side of that, the Buddhist fundamentalism in Myanmar as well. So that's really important that we talk about that. And then I want to talk about that sixth kind of umbrella principle of non-violent resistance in engaged Buddhism. So the dark side is that there is a Buddhist movement within Myanmar that persecutes the Muslim minority. It's horrific. The Rohingya Muslims, who are very much a minority and marginalized in Myanmar, have been starved, have been attacked, have been murdered, have been sent out in boats to die in the sea, just to starve and die out in the sea. And this has been done by Buddhist nationalists who believe that Myanmar should just be for Buddhists, that Muslims are a threat to the Myanmar way of life. And that's because I think they're attached to that idea that their ism and ideology is so important to them that it's more important than anything else, that it's more important than compassion, more important than inclusion and welcome. And any ideology that is threatened by minorities isn't an ideology worth keeping. It's a wrong view to grasp too hard. And so often people feel like they are on the side of justice and use that gut feeling that they're the righteous ones to do evil to other people. And we see that within Buddhism, just as we do with every other ideology and every religion. And I think for balance, it's just really important that we name that. And by the way, the United Nations are doing a lot of work at the moment to support the Rohingya people in Myanmar. And if you want to go to the UN website to support that, then I'll put a link in the comments and the chat below. Also, if you want to comment on anything I've said in this video, or give your experience of using engaged Buddhism, or have a look at my channel, that would be great. Go and have a look at my channel, subscribe, like, share, all of that stuff. And now I'll mention that sixth principle, or umbrella principle, which is hope. And the founder of the organization I used to work for at Citizens UK used to say that action doesn't follow hope, hope follows action. And I think that's why it's important that I say the hope at the end. Hope isn't optimism, it isn't wishful thinking. It's seeing what's improbable but possible and working towards that and not giving up as we continue to use meditation to become aware of the interbeingness of all things, as we listen deeply, as we analyze power carefully, as we practice the Dharma but not hold onto it so fast that we forget our compassion, as we engage with the world so we hope. And keeping alive keeps us hopeful. So rather than hoping keeps us alive. I think that's really important. So thank you for listening, and please subscribe and watch more of these videos, and please give me your comments. I love it when you comment and reflect and engage and even push back. That's all good.